it's me again. And I was thinking how to piece together a video with what I had, and a really good cohesive story came together for me yesterday. Once again, let me reiterate, this is not financial advice. This is entertainment. See this bird? Are you not entertained? This is entertainment. This is my personal thoughts, and you're following me along on my own journey through this, whatever I do. Let's get into it. So in the greater area of where I live, by greater area I mean like a 3-hour drive. I live deep in the heart of Texas, in the town of Granberry. I love Granberry. I've been like, yeah, I love Granberry. They filmed some of the miniseries 1883. It was the Calhoun Hotel in 1883 that was filmed in Granbury. It was Farina's Winery, which is awesome. Like, and then the bar inside of Calhoun Hotel, there's like a bar that they meet up at, and they're like, Sam Elliott says, you know, and his friends say, you know, if we wanted to rob you, we would have done it a long time ago. Where are you going? We need a cowboy to help us lead these immigrants to Montana, like Lonesome Dove. So the guy actually who wrote Yellowstone 1883, he was from Cranfell's Gap. So that's cool, like 6 degrees of separation. Okay, so Granbury. Granbury is also home to Davy Crockett's widow after he died in the Alamo. So Granbury, I love it. It's a very cool historic town. The courthouse is beautiful. And the courthouse was actually used in 1883. They transposed the courthouse from Granbury to the Fort Worth's cow pens, the stockyard. But in Granbury, there's the local goat. Or there was the local goat, which was a distillery. And it was kind of cool because they took the byproducts of making cheese in Stephenville. There's this cheese making place. They have cow and they have goat. They make their own cheese. They raise the animals. It's all like in-house. Like they control the supply chain. They make the cheese. Well, this distillery took the byproducts and they made it into distilled spirits, such as vodka. And so you're making vodka from like whey from cheese, essentially. The byproducts. And they made a rum, and they also made an amaretto. Like the locals loved it for the amaretto. Okay. So sadly, local goat closed. How does this have anything to do with MMTLP? It's like this web formed in my mind. All these, you know, both of my synapses were firing at this point. Okay, so it's closed and we were sad. Bird lady, get to the point. There was a really big winery out in West Texas in Pecos County, east of Fort Stockton, about 25 miles off I-10. It was a big building, and it was actually the biggest winery in Texas, and it was called St. Genevieve Winery. St. Genevieve had some wines. St. Genevieve also did a lot of white label wines. For those who don't know, white label is actually getting a lot more common now. White label is, I make a generic product, it's unlabeled, you stick your label on it. That's white label. There's lots of white label jewelry stores that have taken off with a lot of influencers on social media, or a lot of people, they white label stuff, and look what I just made. It's a white label. But they made white label wines for a lot of restaurants who said, oh, we have our own specific blend. They would sell their wines. This was on university lands. And I'll pull up the map here. I'll circle it. That's basically where it was. It was 1,300 acres in university lands. University lands. Well, how are we going to fund these awesome schools? Well, let's utilize the land. Land's always going to have value to it. We're going to utilize this land. We've seen empires fall and go and currencies come and go. Crazy trades, but what always has value is the land. So, Texas being its own independent country at that time is like, yeah, let's do it. So they took a bunch of land that was unsettled, and it was basically designated for schools. The land that I'm on now, where my farm is, wasn't a university land. It was actually local school land. And it's originally part of the original school tract. and then it was sold to somebody. University Lands is a bit different. It leases land in 19 counties, so it still owns the land. Some of it's been sold, but they still have quite a bit of acreage left in 19 counties. The money from that gets split off between, you know, UT, University of Texas, and Texas A&M. Okay, so we have these university lands. The St. Genevieve Winery was on university lands. They leased it off university lands to make a winery. Not all university lands is oil and gas. There's grazing lands. And this one was a winery land, started in the 1980s, early 80s. In 2005, it was sold, but university lands kept their lands. You know, there's still a lease, but everything else in the winery was sold. The grapes, the equipment, the building, all the, you know, infrastructure, all that was sold. The rights to the St. Genevieve wine, you know, the copyrights, all that, the brands, that was sold. And in 2005 to a company, and it brought a lot of jobs to the area. It brought, you know, winery workers, winemakers, bottlers. They did it all. And then they had a tasting room in Fort Stockton, and that created jobs, and it gave, you know, something to do in Fort Stockton. Like Granberry is actually, they had the distillery, but there's quite a few wineries, like Farina's Winery, where 1883 was filmed. It's rumored to be haunted. There's a ghost tour that goes around Granbury. There's lots of wineries in Granbury, as well as Fredericksburg. And wineries in Texas are, like, big. In fact, when I moved to Texas to start a farm, they said, you ain't building another winery, are you? That was actually a question asked to me. Like, oh, I'm going to start a farm. You're not doing a winery, are you? I said, no, I'm going to do some sheep. Okay. Good job. So this winery closed. How is this? Again, Burlade, how does this have anything to do with MMTLP? This is part of the story. It sat on university lands of St. Genevieve Winery, biggest winery in Texas, and it was leased out. Back in 2014, early 2014, January, we had a freeze here in Texas. It wasn't as bad as the freeze of 2021 February. I'll say that. It wasn't as bad. But it was a big freeze. It was about, at my house, 14 degrees for about a week. And it got down to about 10 to 14 degrees for about a week. We've had other freezes where it got down since then to about 7 degrees. And of course, the really big freeze where it got down to 0. But there's a couple nights where it got down to 7 since then. Anyhow, it was 14 degrees for a week. Most of those grapes wound up dying in Fort Stockton. They lost a lot of grapes. As a result, University Lands gave a waiver to help out the winery. They gave a waiver of the lease to help out the winery. Because the winery was struggling. They didn't have any grapes they had to rebuild. And they had some stock left they could sell, but they'd have to, you know, replant some grapes here. And for a while, they'd be hurting University Land. Says, that's okay. It's easier just to keep you on here than to find somebody new. You know, this is already established. Let's just give you a waiver. Okay. Sadly, St. Genevieve, you know, closed its doors earlier this year in 2022. And it makes you wonder, there's a lot of FUD about with MMTLP and NextBridge and this whole lease agreement and a lien. For example, one of the FUDs is that NextBridge doesn't have the money to pay back the loan to Meta and thus will default on it. That loan that said September 30th, but in the S1 was extended to February of 2023. It was extended. You can't extend that loan. It was extended by Meta. And even if NextBridge can't pay it back, there's a grantor for this loan, Greg McCabe, meaning Greg McCabe owes the monies. And then if the grantor doesn't pay off after so many days, then you have a lien against it. There's also another FUD piece that says that NextBridge Hydrocarbons won't have the money to do the 20 2022 drill plan, which is 5 new wells. Now, according to the S1 I talked about in the last video, they did do the planning and the legwork for these wells. They're prepped. They're prepped and ready for drilling. The next 5 wells, it's prepped. The FUD is they're not going to have the money to drill those 5 wells and thus default on their lease. University Lands has given waivers before for lease agreements. Who isn't to say that University Lands will give a waiver this time for this lease agreement? They're prepped, they're ready. What if there isn't, a sale that might happen? And as a result, University Lands goes, okay, well, here's a waiver. That's fine. I've leased out property before, and I've given waivers to people, who have leased property from me. I've given waivers. You can do that. You can give waivers, especially in Texas. That's fine. That's an agreement between you and the leasee on property. But in general, like the use of land, a land use, you can do waivers. For example, a hunter can lease land from a landowner. Cattleman can do it and say, hey, I'll make improvements to your property if you lease it out. And you say, I agree to this lease, pay me a fee. And then part of this lease agreement is you put up so much fence or make improvements. Here's the schedule of improvements I want you to make on this property. If they, something happens and he can't do it, he's a good guy. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. We'll get it next time. You can do that. University Lands has done that. St. Genevieve is an example. They had problems in 2014. University Lands gave a waiver. Who isn't to say that University Lands won't give a waiver this time? Maybe there's a sale and they say, okay, yeah, let's just have a waiver there and that'll be great. Once the sale happens, that satisfies all the loan agreements as written. That's raising capital. You can raise capital through a sale. All those raising capital requirements can be met through a sale. And that's my little story today. Like I said, it really came together yesterday when I was in line buying the bottles. I bought a lot of bottles from local goat distillery. Some for my own use. A lot of them are gifts. A lot of people were there buying other bottles as gifts too. But they're gifts for people. Some people like martinis, and I'm like, my one friend, he likes martinis. And we're like, yeah, let's get that gin that they distill there, He likes goats and he likes martinis, so that's like perfect for him. Like, okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. And I hope that uses your mind a bit on all this FUD that's going around. I will see you soon. Goodbye.